Hey everyone, I'm ex-TV producer Jennifer Moore, and I'm very excited because in this episode, we actually have a real guest. With me right now is longtime Tampa TV newsman, Brendan McLaughlin. Thank you so much for being here today.
It's my pleasure, Jennifer. It was great working with you as briefly as we did, but it's good to reconnect and happy to join you today.
Definitely. So Brendan is now in the ex-TV Newser Club. So Brendan, what jobs have you held at various TV stations over the years?
I started as an intern in San Francisco, and I worked on the assignment desk. So that was pretty much the whole stint there, which was a great place to start because that's kind of the nerve center of a newsroom, and you kind of see how the different parts interact. Then I went on to become a reporter and then a news anchor reporter. Toward the end of my career, I actually went back to handling a camera. I actually handled the camera for the first time as an MMJ, what we call a multimedia journalist. And so I would shoot, edit, narrate, and present my own stories. So that's the long and short of it.
Wonderful. And why did you get into the TV news business originally?
You know, I was a little slow to the game there. I was 29 when I was an intern, like one of the oldest interns I think they had at KPIX at the time. Maybe before or after. And then I was 30 when I got my first on-air job. But it always seemed to me to be the kind of job where every day is a clean slate. I have a little bit of ADD. I have a relatively short attention span. And so it was perfect. It's like you walk out the door at the end of the day and it's an all clean slate. So I was able to focus on one project, one story intensely, throughout the course of the day. Of course, there's always the kind of the joy of creativity, of asking that perfect question or telling a story that invokes a little emotion, based on the words and the pictures that you've chosen. So there's that creative satisfaction for sure.
Yeah, and you probably put out thousands and thousands of stories over the years.
You really stop to add it up, but yeah, could be a big number.
All right, now what, in your opinion, what's the best part about working in the news business?
Well, it's everything I just mentioned for sure. In terms of every day being different, you get opened up. Pardon the aircraft traffic here. You get opened up to a different subject every day. Something you may have not have known anything about. The mistreatment of elephants at a farm out in rural Florida or Texas, and there are legal questions that you learn a lot about. There's law enforcement. Regulations, government, school boards, that sort of thing. So if you're at all curious, it's a really satisfying career. And I found that to be one of the parts I enjoyed most.
Yeah, same here. I would definitely agree with you. And all right, what was the worst part about working in news?
Yeah, where do we start? I focus
schedule?
on the positive, yeah, it's kind of it's one of the most inflexible jobs you could take. You have zero control over your time, really. You can budget within the time that you're given. You're under constant deadline pressure and time pressure. In other words, you only have so much time to tell your story. In my case, it was usually a minute 30. That was my movie. And if you had more to say, well, you just had to figure out what stayed and what went.
Yeah, what are you going to cut?
Right. It's also kind of a career, at least if you're on the air like I was, or if you're a producer, certainly. Better never than late was this. Remember that? It's not an option to be late.
Like you're either going to make air or you're going to make art. Yeah, it has to get on.
Yes. So and in the broader sense, you work holidays. You're not able to take off during the sweeps months of February and November and July and May. And so you can't be off when your co-anchor is off in my case. So it really made doing things on your personal life a little difficult.
Definitely. And what would you like the world to know about TV news that you feel might not be evident to the average person?
That's a good question because people are interested in television and television news, but not many people actually have been behind the scenes or know much about how it actually comes together. But I guess one misconception I think that I see out there is there's a sense maybe that there's a concerted or coordinated effort to put forth a certain editorial stance. And I can only speak to the local news part of this, but that's simply not the case. I mean, there's no secret meeting in the morning to advance any particular agenda. So there's no explicit bias. I really just don't buy it. There's implicit bias, of course. We all are thinking, sentient human beings. I wouldn't want to watch a reporter or a news anchor who didn't have an opinion at all on a news story. Of course we have opinions, but the challenge is to sort of put your bias aside or be aware of your bias and do your best to just be fair to everybody and as impartial as you can on these issues. And my experience has been that most of the people I worked with do a pretty good job of that.
Yeah, it's definitely the exception more than the rule. There were, you're right. We weren't sitting around being like, well, how can we spin this story this way? You don't have time for that.
And if there is a bias that sort of runs through local television news, it's in favor of the sponsors. Everybody's aware that, before you do a story that trashes, the local Ford dealership,
the car dealership,
you might want to have a conversation with your manager on that. So that is just, that's perhaps a inevitable result of the way local television news is financed.
No, good, very good thoughts. And is there one story in particular that sticks out to you as having a really big impact on you?
I think in the news business, we do a pretty good job of distancing ourselves from the awful things that we talk about and cover, much the way like emergency room doctors do. We see and talk about some pretty tough stuff. And I think if we let it get in and we didn't have the gallows humor to sort of brush it off, it would be tough to do. So we're good at that. But, stories involving children being abused or neglected are really tough and hard to understand. There's a lot of human behavior that I can understand, but like serial killers, we just had a serial killer here in Tampa in the Seminole Heights area, and this was somebody that just randomly and with no apparent pattern with gender or race or age just was executing people on the street. He's been caught, but everybody is wrestling with the question of why in the world would this college graduate with otherwise perhaps a bright future, who didn't seem to be visibly unhinged or off his meds, would do something so awful. So, that's very unsettling. We deal with those issues a lot, and I have no answer. And that
there are no answers for some of these behaviors we see, or when you think you're like, oh, I've seen it all, then something else comes along and you're like, wow, did not see that coming. Well, all right. So we're here on YouTube. Let's talk about viral stories. You've probably covered a lot of stories that went viral. What attributes have you noticed they tend to have?
Well, it was, it was in the last sort of 5-6 years of my career that the internet, social media became a real big driver. And my observation is that positive stories, uplifting stories, funny stories tend to go viral more readily than negative, nasty stuff.
Yeah.
And that's logical enough, I suppose. I mean, I think the news by its very nature can be negative because we don't run a story on the accident that didn't happen on I-275. We do the accident that did happen because that's the news. So I think people are sort of delighted and charmed and sort of gravitate toward a story that shows the positive side of human nature. Somebody doing something above and beyond, like unconditional generosity, that type of thing seems to really get a great reaction. If I could take a moment to tell you one example that I did that went super viral, and I didn't anticipate that. It was my carpet cleaner, guy who, chem dry guy. He was in my Rolodex, and I would call him up every 6 months or so to come and do some spots on the floor. And he was a chatty guy, and he happened to mention that on his days off on the weekend, he would go to cemeteries on his own with his cleaning equipment and very carefully, with a lot of research, clean these very old, neglected tombstones of veterans that were unreadable, unrecognizable because they'd just been covered with tree sap and dirt and mud. Nobody was tending them. And he would turn these, stones into beautiful, almost pieces of art because, the original marble or the granite, was just like new. And he did this without any recognition or any compensation on his time off. So I thought, wow, that would be a cool story. So we did it.
I definitely, and you know what? The networks all picked it up. So it's one of those things where it's so good, you want to share it with people.
Yeah, and it's still going viral in a sense, in that he has got his own Facebook page that gets an enormous amount of traffic every day, and he's kind of turned it into a bit of a nonprofit career. And I'll take credit for coining the phrase "good cemeterian," so it helps have a catchy handle.
Wow. Well, that's a wonderful story. And that's a good example about a story, starting just from you having a conversation with the guy
Right,
to him being known around the world. All right. So, we're going to talk to the media relations and PR folks now. For the folks watching who want to develop a relationship with media outlets, if you are coming up with some sort of guide on best practices, what kind of stuff would be in it?
Okay, well, I'm a little out of my league with this story, just because as a news guy, I had the luxury of not caring about marketing and sales and public relations, that kind of thing. But I guess what I would have to say about that is that if you wanted to develop a relationship with a television station, or increase the chances that you can get coverage on a particular story or a product or a business that you're starting, you go to the assignment editor.
Exactly. They don't go to you in the field and be like, Brendan, can you get my story on the air?
Right. And in fact, I wouldn't even go, with all due respect, ex-producer, I wouldn't go to the producer either, because the producer is dealing with the menu that they have in front of them that is usually directed by the news director and the assignment editor. So the assignment editor is somebody that you need to know their name. You need to go in and schedule a visit.
And just meet them.
Happy to show you around. And if they can have lunch.
Maybe bring some food with you,
Yes, it doesn't hurt.
People love free food.
Right. But most importantly, you will have a fruitful relationship if you bring them stories that they can actually turn. I think a lot of people on the other end trying to get coverage don't understand that television stations need video. They need people to talk to. They need things to shoot. So you need to provide them with a happening. An event is happening on this date that you can actually go and videotape.
Yeah.
And you can talk to not the officials, not the president or the executive vice president or the director of whatever, but real people that are involved with whatever mission or product that you're talking about. So, I don't like to use the term victim, but if you're talking about a disease or a malady, whatever it might be, or a social ill, yes, talk to somebody who's adversely affected that could speak firsthand to what this story is about. That's the hardest part. A lot of organizations like a shelter for battered women, for example, there's confidentiality issues. It's very difficult to sometimes it's not so easy. Like, I want to talk to a woman who's a victim of domestic violence. But to make an impactful story at the end of the day, you need to have that person in your story. So you have to develop a relationship, develop some trust. They need to trust that you are going to protect that person's anonymity, if that's the case, or treat their story with fairness and compassion above all. So it's a process, but I think that's the bottom line.
All good thoughts. And actually, I have a lot of the same opinions. I think most of us do generally. Sure. So that's definitely something we have in common. All right. So what are some ways for, say, a YouTuber to get noticed by traditional media, like TV stations?
Yeah. I must say I flagrantly cribbed YouTube video from all sources. When you had nothing else, you can go to YouTube sometimes and find video and try to contact the person to permission.
Like, hey, that kid's from Tampa. He can do skateboard tricks or something.
Right. But I think a lot of the same things apply. I mean, if you have a YouTube channel, you might be reaching an audience. You might be in touch with a trend, or a hobby, or a pastime, or an activity that the traditional media knows nothing about, and they love nothing better than to report on the latest trend,
the latest craze,
and sometimes they're laughably, woefully behind. I mean, how many times have you read the script? Like, now we're going to have a report on the new craze of rolfing, and which is a type of massage. Well, I'm old enough to remember rolfing was from the 70s, and things come around again. So
it's not exactly a new thing. Or do you remember that thing where kids were doing their own DIY braces? I was like, this is insane. Where kids were taking like hair bands, and I'm like, you should not. Like, that's a terrible idea.
Right.
But stuff like that, like, kids are just getting it. They'll all make videos on one thing, and I don't know, some of them can be kind of dangerous.
Right. So that's why YouTubers are closer to the ground in a sense, and maybe they catch wind of some of these trends. the good ones and the not so good ones before anybody else does. And if you can communicate that to your local TV station or newspaper, they'll be interested.
Oh, definitely. All right. So there are lots of people out there who are considering a career in TV news like you've had. And what advice would you give them right now?
I guess the same advice I would have given them 22 years ago, or 28 years ago when I first got into the business. And that is, at the end of the day, it's all about content. It's all about storytelling. And if you're sincere about that, if you're interested in the world around you, then you'll take the time to learn about it, at least learn enough about it to communicate whatever the news is. In other words, if you're doing a story about a plane crash, take the time out to learn a little bit about the plane involved and the process by which planes go up in the air. Because if you don't, your ignorance will manifest itself somewhere along the line. You don't have to become an expert in anything, but you have to take the effort and show the natural curiosity to learn enough about whatever subject you want to talk about, to convey a sincerity that you're interested. Because if you're interested while you're telling or communicating or writing about a subject or pardon me, or a news story, that's what people like to watch. That's what people care about, and that's gonna make you have some impact.
That's good advice, Brendan. All right. So you left ABC Action News a few years ago. Why did you decide to leave the business?
Well, they finally they caught me. I was stealing office supplies for many, many years.
You were stealing staplers and Post-its and
staples and Post-its and stuff, and I just they found my big storehouse. But no, it was. I guess it was cumulative. I was trying to get the dog over here. This is Finnegan.
And I've seen Finnegan in photos. Oh, hey, Finnegan.
Hey, buddy. Good dog. Anyway, I get to spend more time with him for one thing. But more to the point, I guess it was, I will blame social media in a sense. In other words, I think what happened to a lot of us in the business at the time was management came to us and said, hey, in addition to everything you're doing for in preparation for the 5, 6, and 11 o'clock news, we need you to post or tweet or make Facebook posts or provide content for our webpage many times a day throughout the day. And that fundamentally changes the job. It's a whole layer.
Yeah.
And so I did it, and I think I did it pretty well for, about the last 5 or 6 years. But then I just got to the point where I just decided this is really just gotten hard to the point where I think it's a good time to bail. And that's what I did. So I have no regrets. In fact, it's a little unnerving how little I've missed the work environment because I've stayed busy and I've been, I'm not at loose ends. It seems like some days I'm too busy. And eventually, not to ramble on here, but eventually I would like to get back to some sort of form of expression and communication, whether it's writing, who knows, maybe it's YouTube.
Maybe you could do a YouTube channel with Finnegan? He could be your co-host.
Yes, Finn and me.
Finn and
So, okay, we're on to something. Let's.
I think you totally are, and I think I would watch. I'll be a subscriber.
Okay, great. But I have nothing but gratitude for the career I had and the time I had in the business. I met amazing people. I learned so much about the world around me, and I learned about myself and other people. So, to somebody just getting into the business, I would say absolutely do it, because what this business is going to look like in 5 years is anybody's guess. But again, if you have a passion for storytelling and communication, then this is where you need to be.
Yep. All right. Now, since you left Channel 28, what kind of stuff have you been up to?
Well, I've been doing a couple TV gigs. I will confess. Some of your
I saw you on Channel 8.
I know. Yeah, I did a little gig on election night there, and but I've done some sort of something that no self-respecting news person would do while they're working, and that's some commercials like Medicare. Yes, and I'm not old enough for Medicare, but I guess I look old enough. So,
but you can represent them, so that's cool.
Yeah. So you may have seen me on your cable channel pitching MedicareAdvantage.com or some other such supplementary healthcare plan. But it's it's a little walking around money and fun to get back in the studio from time to time. I do it completely on my own volition, on my own schedule. I have some side projects. I've been delving in real estate, as you know, and just trying to get to the gym, on a pretty regular schedule, and spending more time with friends, and really enjoying not having that inflexibility we talked about.
Exactly. The thing we've been lacking for so long.
Yeah. I mean, I'm doing a lot of the same stuff I did while I was working, but I got all day to do it, and it feels so much better.
And you've done a lot of traveling as well, right?
Yeah, I did. I mean, after I quit, I bought a 1994 Dodge Pleasureway van. It's like a completely built out camper, essentially, with everything. And by myself, my wife continues to work. I drove to California the long way, stayed at national parks and state parks all along the way. Took a month to get to California, and then I turned around and drove back on the southern route. And so, yeah, 2 months on the road, seeing nature, seeing America, seeing small towns, Marfa, Texas, Billings, Montana, Jackson Hole, all kinds of cool spots. And it was just a great experience. And I've taken some international trips as well. Again, that flexibility.
And haven't you been blogging a little bit too?
A little bit, yeah. I mean, I did blog, so to speak, on my travels cross country and on my Argentina trip. And but yeah, alas, I'm a little undisciplined about that.
And I saw for a while you'd grown out a beard, so you called the blog, wasn't it Sabeardical, which I thought was an awesome name.
Brilliant wordplay.
But I know you've since gone clean shaven, so no more Sabeardical.
Oh yeah, it looks. If you want to, of course, it's not an option for you. But if you want to make yourself look 15 years older, grow a
beard. Maybe I'll try that. Maybe that could work for me. All right. Well, what is your favorite social media platform?
Well, I'm kind of a Facebooker, I guess, which is, I guess for a baby boomer like me, that's where you're at. But my kids, who are 30 and 31 respectively, are on Snapchat, so we have fun with that. And
do you have a Snapchat account?
I do.
You do? What's your Snapchat handle? To get people to follow you. If anyone's watching this show, I don't know.
I have to look. I just sort of, it's one of those things. What's my handle? I don't really use it, but I really see the appeal. It
is a lot of fun.
Of Snapchat. It says Brendan McLaughlin. Oh, McBrendan1? Try that. McBrendan1. McBrendan1.
McBrendan1?
McBrendan1, yeah.
All right. I'll pop that up on the screen if you guys want to follow Brendan on Snapchat. All right.
Okay.
And Brendan, what do you think TV stations can do? This is a very interesting time for the business. What can TV stations do to adapt to be able to survive this whole landscape of new media?
That's really the million dollar
question. Yeah.
Because they are sweating bullets. And that's another reason I left, because it's an industry, it's a business in existential crisis. They don't know if they're going to be around in another 5 or 10 years. So, I mean, that's not a very fun, optimistic environment to work in. My daughter works in solar energy. I mean, that's a new industry. It's like the future is ahead of them. So it's exciting to go to work. But television news, I think, has got such a powerful platform. I think people are always going to love to sit on their couch and let somebody else decide what's important, what happened that day that's relevant to them. I really think that's always going to exist. But the fact that the television stations have still been unable, after all these years, to break away from that basic male anchor, female co-anchor, likable sports guy, weather guy, 12 minutes for the first segment, break, the same format. Everybody's doing exactly the same thing, and it's the same thing they've been doing for 30 years, because everybody's afraid to step out of that. And every time they do, you've seen this, we're going to go out of the box, and we're going to
do something different.
We're going to stand up in the newsroom and walk from desk to desk, and it's going to just blow up the paradigm. Well, of course it doesn't, because it's not a substantial or a material change. So I don't know, because the audience is definitely shrinking pretty steadily, and who knows how low it can go. But as your generation and my kids' generation, they're not watching local TV news on that schedule appointment television. That's just not a thing anymore. So after we're gone, I don't know what they're going to do, but I think they're going to have to become a little bit more like YouTube, which is not to say cat videos.
Yeah.
I think there's, to quote Edward R. Murrow, I love this quote, and I hate to be a name dropper. Johnny Carson said, nobody likes a name dropper. He told me that. But Murrow said people watch the news at the end of the day to find out if their world is safe. And it's that elemental. It's that fundamental. There's a need to check in with your environment, your local environment, not the world, not the country, but your town, and to find out what blew up or what didn't blow up, or what's the crime situation, what's the weather situation. And so that's a powerful drive, and local news is in a unique position to sort of meet that need. But they're going to have to do it in a much more relevant and engaging way.
Yeah, and I was even thinking, I would like to see more stations allowing their anchors and reporters to have YouTube channels or to do more on their own to allow people to get to know them as people instead of, just on the newscast, because I think there's a disconnect with some level of distrust. So I think letting them get to know the people on your air might help them and might encourage them to actually watch the show.
I agree, Jennifer. Here's one of the complications with that, though, and we were all doing it. And anybody on the air today knows that they have a Facebook presence and they do engage viewers in a somewhat quasi-personal way, but everybody is acutely aware that you're on a razor's edge. If you say something that's not correct, not politically palatable to certain people, if you're controversial, if you say something perhaps crude or offensive, even in jest, you're in trouble, and your job is on the line. So it tends to be very bland.
That's true, but because they don't want to do anything that would jeopardize their job.
Right. So you're not really getting to know James Wilkinson or whoever the anchor is. You're getting to know just a very curated, very carefully guarded version of him. So you're right. If what I see happening is that I think local television stations they're going to try to form their own identity, and some of them are going to be a little bit like morning radio. Like they're going to be edgier for real, and they're going to have to make the decision that we're going to lose certain sponsors and we're going to lose certain segments of the audience, but we're going to make up for it by getting a fiercely loyal different segment of the audience, and we might have sponsors that also have no problem being part of something a little edgier and even controversial.
Well, it'll be I'm very curious to see what's going to shake it over the next 5-10 years. We don't know.
It's true. It'll be fun to watch, and I'll be watching from retirement for the most part.
You'll be watching with Finnegan, right?
Yeah.
Well, one last thing. I'm going to give you the opportunity to ask this audience anything you want. So, do you have a question of the day for our viewers?
I guess so. Yeah, and it's coming back to local television news. And that my question would be: if you do watch local television news at all, why are you going there? What specific thing are you watching local television news for? Is it the weather? Is it the sports scores? Is it, back to my earlier point, to find out what blew up? Is it because you like watching somebody? You like the way they look? You're in love with your anchor? So I'm kind of curious as to what that driver is and what people find most important in local news today.
All right, guys, you heard Brendan's question. If you're watching right now, leave a comment and answer his question of the day. If you do watch local news, what brings you there? Well, Brendan, thank you so much for joining me as our very first guest on XTV Producer.
Well, it's an honor, Jennifer. It was great working with you, and I'm so excited to see you doing this great project here. You're going to be successful, as you always have been. And,
the good thing is there's zero startup costs, so the risk is low.
I know, but you bring a lot to the table, and I think you're going to do great. Thanks for making me a part of it.
No, thank you so much. And for all of you out there, if you're also an XTV Newser and you'd like to be featured here on XTV Producer channel, feel free to hit me up on Twitter. I'm at XTV Producer. Brendan, again, thank you so much. I'm Jennifer Moore.